That was your spine being cracked.
We need to do Foley work better.
This is just an ASMR show now.
Well, we could do some Foley art. I tried to make a cracking
sound in my head, and you made a so much better sound than I was about to make. So I was going to be like, it was not going to work.
Me or Gabe?
You, Matt.
Yes.
Of course, yeah, Matt's was good. Wait, what,
well, you do,
what kind of art?
Foley art.
Foley art?
I don't know what that is.
That's like when people make like footsteps in like a weird room in like Hollywood that's full of like garbage, and they're like making sounds for the Hobbit movie. You know what I mean?
Right. Paul gave the most niche bad explanation I've ever heard. It's just people who make sound. It was a much more highly valued skill, I believe, in the old radio days, which obviously podcasts have been described as just a reinvention of. So yeah, they would make like sound effects for stuff and.
Oh, okay. Okay. You guys, I feel like you're just talking about musique concrete.
No, that's.
We're talking about stomp, actually.
I do know what that is, so I can't claim to be less hipster than you. But yes, it's more like if I'm like, oh, and then the bone's broken, then I had a bunch of celery that I snapped, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. Like what you're saying, like with radio plays and whatnot.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Be cool. It would be much more old school than a soundboard, which I feel like would also be dope to have, but
we got to figure out how to make that work.
The evolution beyond just Zoom feeding through clean feed is slow to happen. Listen, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Well, you also need fucking audio. Anyway, if you want those things, patreon.com/spinecrackers, you can support the show for as little as $2 a month. If you want the full episodes, bonus videos, access to the Discord, and you want to fund our getting better audio or just more varied audio
our
equipment.
Foley studios, our own
render unto Caesar.
That's right.
Why don't you? Yeah.
So
this is Spinecrackers.
That's right.
Maybe you wandered into these parts a little unawares, but this is Spinecrackers.
And there's only room enough for 3 of us in this town.
It's a 3-horse town.
Unless we have a guest, which we love.
Unless there's a guest, unless we invite...
4-horse town.
Warmly invite someone else.
My name is Gabe. I'm one of the hosts of the Spinecrackers podcast.
My name's Matt.
My name is Paul. I'm one of the hosts of the Spinecrackers podcast.
And what are we talking about today, boys?
Paul's pick. So?
My pick. We're talking about Like Life by Lorrie Moore. I picked it.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is, when did this come out? 90? 1990?
No.
No.
My first copyright is 88, I thought.
Well, some of the stories are from the 80s, but this collection I think came out in 1990. So, as the astute listener will gather, this is a collection of short stories by American author Lorrie Moore.
Go
ahead, man.
I would say that's basically what she's known for predominantly, right? She's got novels.
She has a couple novels.
Yeah, she's got like 3 novels, and I think she's got like 7 or 8 collections of short stories.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And she wrote a bunch. She would write short stories for the New York Times in the paper.
New Yorker, probably, maybe?
The New Yorker Times. Yeah.
Yes. Basically. I mean, who fucking cares? Yeah.
The New Yorker Times magazine.
New Roman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like she could bust out short stories a lot quicker. Like, she wrote her last novel, and it took her like 10 years. So
it makes me want to read it really badly, actually.
Yeah, I actually do. Well, it would be cool to read one of her novels, but today we're talking about this short story collection. Now, I had never heard of Moore. Seems kind of like a... Had anyone heard of her before this at all? Or I don't think anyone had read any of her work.
I had known about her for a long time, and it's one of those like shamefacedly. I don't know why someone. It was like way back in like I don't know, not way back, but like I think in college, someone said that she was basically their favorite writer, and that Birds of America was their favorite book.
Which is one of her other collections, right? That's not one of the novels.
No, I think that's another short story collection.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, since around then, I've sort of she's just been a name in my head. But yeah, I don't know why the fuck I never picked up a collection. I guess
sexism,
misogynist. Yeah,
yeah,
easy answer.
Easy answer right there.
Yeah,
totally easy.
Well, not to spoilers for the episode, but I am very glad that we finally did.
Dude,
yeah,
amazing.
Yeah,
it's not. Spoilers. Yeah.
Yeah, spoilers. This book fucking slaps really hard.
It's a slapper.
I keep wanting to say slaps ass, and that's like
sexism.
That's like it's like the third time I've said it tonight for some reason.
I mean, it forms a coherent phrase.
Yeah. It slaps.
And it does kind of.
Period.
Well, that's sexist.
Well, so whatever. We live in a society. So Paul, what made you pick this book then? Like, given that you had never heard of her, hadn't read her work.
It was kind of like a stumble upon pick yet again for me. Like I was just looking up. I actually found it on a list of like the top 100 American writers, and she was like pretty low down on the list. But I just like I
always
wanted
the
to
interesting
push
part of the list.
What? Oh,
that's always the interesting part. Yeah.
We get it. Melville, Faulkner. Bleh.
The Great Gatsby. Great writer, Gatsby. I get it. But I wanted to make an effort to pick more female writers this year. And this was before the Discord called us out on that. So I just wanted to throw it out there. I made this choice before that. So yeah, I just, basically just read a little snippet about what the book was about, and I was like, yeah, fucking go ahead and pick it. It was in the page range and everything.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Boom.
So is this our second short story collection? We did the episode on Capote. Was there another one?
Soul of Wood.
Soul of Wood.
So.
Yeah, that book sucked, sadly.
Yeah. The one difficulty I have with the reviewing the short stories like on the show is just that it becomes a little bit of a muddle, like and I don't like that because like I feel like especially when they're good, every short story is like, not that they don't comprise a whole work and they're in a collection for a reason, but like every single one is like a very like crystalline kind of perfect structure that you want to do justice to that way, and I do.
Well, this is why we have the Patreon section of the podcast, and we can extend it as long as we want.
In my recollection, the muddle just gets worse but whatever.
That's what the people want, though.
True, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I do think it's a difficult thing to talk about a short story collection as a whole for a lot of those reasons that you said, Matt. Like, we probably could talk about almost every story in here for half hour, 45 minutes on its own, if not longer, and that would be a 5-hour episode. But also because it's not like a novel where you have a couple characters and like one narrative, and so you have to kind of like dig a little bit harder for, like you said, they're in a collection for a reason, but you have to dig around a little bit for what that reason is exactly, if that makes sense. Like what that through line is, whether it's thematically or whatever, stylistically.
Yeah, I do think with this collection, though, to me, like they, as a collection, they seem to gel pretty well as opposed to the last collections we've read, especially the Capote collection. This one, I could like feel the themes throughout it.
I think one of the first things I noticed that was super strong was like a tonal consistency that was not at all tiring, because the tone itself was this completely mesmerizing, like admixture of like every emotion, it felt like essentially. Mm-hmm. Which is why I don't know. Yeah, like, I know we were talking about this off the show or whatever, but like I was moved by a lot of these, and like that has for me often that's like a tends to be the product of like the kind of tragic comic nature of life and whatever, like and that's something that Moore did like super well in this, like, and I feel like that's kind of something she does. I mean, this is the first book I read, but something she seems to do. Well, that seems to be one of the themes. It's like sad, but it's not just that. It's
right. You were kind of saying that like before we got on, like you were like, I think I'm sad, but like had this sort of questioning about it, like how do I feel about these characters or these stories? And yeah, I think it's you hit the nail on the head. It's like I mean, I think my overwhelming sense was mostly sad, but there's a lot of other kind of things rippling underneath that inflect it differently when the stories are looked at differently.
I feel like the last story was the one that kind of went the most in that in the raw kind of like sad direction, but also is that where the title's plucked?
Yeah, so the last story is called Like Life. Which, by the way, I mean, I'll just say I don't love the title of the collection just because I don't know, it rubbed me the wrong way. But in the story, it just, I don't know, it's just kind of cringe. It's like, my stories are like life, man, or like whatever. Like you just think some cringe thing. But in the context of the story, it actually made more sense than just plucked for a title, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes out in a pretty dark little snippet of a sentence. Like the title comes out of like a doctor saying the character has like a precancerous mole, and she's like, "What the fuck does precancerous mean?" And she's just like, "Is that like life? Like you're like as if cancer is death, isn't precancer like life?"
Yeah, something. Well, and then it comes up again in her interaction with the woman in the bathroom too, where the woman in the bathroom is talking about her love life, and she goes, "I don't have a love life, I have a like life." Right?
Yeah.
So it's echoed in a couple different ways there. Well, so I mean, yeah. How do you guys want to tackle this? Should we talk about that last story, or do you want to give some brief synopses of a couple other ones, or again the short story? Perhaps something we should have talked about ahead of time, but here we are.
Oh, I definitely want to talk about the story, The Jewish Hunter.
That's maybe my favorite one in the.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just go in order, because I feel like that's always my tendency, just because I feel like an album order or something, it's like the intended vision of the writer themselves, hopefully, is part of that. So maybe just go.
Also good for marketing, because if you're listening to the public episode, you're not going to be able to hear us talk about every story because it's going to go too longer than an hour.
100%.
So you just want to do that? Just plow through story by story and see where it takes us. We'll get to the end of story 2, and then we'll go into the Patreon, basically.
Yeah. I mean, but before we get into the details, I mean, I guess Paul, you were talking about cohesive themes. Like, what were those themes for you that emerged through these stories? Just like big picture.
Well, I would say like the majority, maybe like 4 or 5 of the stories is mostly from the viewpoint of a female character struggling, either being single or in a relationship or in a bad relationship. But they all seem to encapsulate relationships, I would say, for sure. There's a couple stories about or one story in particular is about like an older married woman. So yeah, it deals with like how people are dealing with the emotions of a long-term relationship, of being single for a long time, but the themes kind of run throughout of like loneliness, a push for wanting a romantic relationship in their life, feelings of loss. But Moore does it with such like an understanding of the human spirit, and with such a wit and like a poetic capability that is just like, like how Matt was saying, it encapsulates like every human emotion, how she does it. Like, I think I'm with you, Gabe. Like when I picked it because I was interested, but I was kind of like, the cover's a little cringy. The title's a little maybe possibly cringy, but I was blown away and happy that I picked such a great book. Tap on the back for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like that talking about the relationships, it seems to me like a lot of these stories are about the various vicissitudes and ways of express, like types of expression of love. There's romances that kind of like flourish under very specific conditions and then have to get left behind in these stories. There's long-term married romances. There's the love of a mother for her daughter and sort of vicariously through another male character and a son. There's these clearly troubled relationships between people in the depths of poverty that are kind of borderline abusive, and again, all of that, just like that sort of prismatic view of love, I think to me was a big part of it.
Yeah, that would
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's only one story that actually is from a male's perspective.
Yes.
Right?
Second one?
Two?
Yeah, the second one. I think there's only the one.
Yeah.
But it doesn't totally matter. The themes are still alive and well in that story as well.
And also like just the ways in which people's environment interacts with their mental states, I think is another big one, because these stories take place in big cities and also in sort of like nondescript, like small Midwestern towns. And I feel like Moore has a big, she puts a lot of emphasis on the way that people's emotions and mental states interact with their environments.
Yeah.
Which makes her very like singular, it feels to me, American writer too. Like a lot of these subtleties are of place within the United States, and therefore like, and we all are basically like from the general region that Lorrie Moore is from, and we're just sort of familiar with like a little bit her migratory pattern, because a lot of the places she mentions were places she was for professional or personal reasons also in her life. Obviously, this was probably the only one of the few like biographical kind of things that she was using, but like it feels very well observed as people familiar with a lot of the places she's describing in the book. And
like I currently live in a small Midwestern town. Paul lived in a large Midwestern city that's mentioned in the book at one point, and so I think that's true, Matt. Maybe that's part of why it hit me. It's just that that sense of migration and place. Like all of these stories feel so rooted in where they take place, like in such important ways.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think
basically
she's actually
only by
lived
someone
in,
who could live there.
Yeah,
she's lived in Madison, Wisconsin, I think, for like the last 30 plus years too.
Yeah, I think she's a teacher.
Yeah,
professor. Don't get it twisted, baby.
Professor.
Prof. Sorry. Yeah.
Prof.
All right. Well, so if we're just gonna plow through these, let's talk about the first one, which is titled "Two Boys." What's this one about? Who wants to take it?
I'll go first.
All right.
From what this is the first one I read. I don't know about you, but it's kind of shaky.
Me too, dude.
Is it? Wow.
Yeah, it's the first one in the book.
That's insane.
That was one of my dry jokes. That doesn't sound like a joke, but whatever.
We just don't get you.
Yeah, this one is about a character named Mary. It takes place in Cleveland, and she basically has these two unnamed boyfriends. It's that she's dating. One's married, one is not, and she calls them number one and number two. And it just basically, from what I remember, it kind of just goes back and forth between her experiences with these two, and they both have their kind of issues, and she's just kind of like, I don't even know. She's like seeing where they go, but also knowing that they're kind of dead ends as well. Her motives are kind of unclear, but it just kind of goes down to like the theme of her being like a sad single person, just and kind of going through what's happening in front of her and the experiences that are in front of her and the people that like.
And she's I feel like Moore writes her and like explicitly states like she's arguably going through a type of like mental breakdown throughout the book, right?
Yeah, and that felt big.
And she constructs like a third boyfriend in her head as well, right? That's kind of an amalgam of the two.
Number three, yeah.
Number three.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she basically says that, like, oh, if only you two were like both, like the good parts of you were into this person named number 3, that'd be a perfect boyfriend for me. Yeah.
And we were talking about how, these are all about love in various ways and relationships, and this one it feels like the right thing to start with, almost like the fact of just finding something lacking, and essentially like that initial desire to be like Dr. Frankenstein and somehow graft together the perfect person if you could, but it's not going to happen. And it feels like that definitely taking a toll to the point where maybe she's going to have a breakdown. I mean, she explicitly describes herself as like shortly hereafter I will have a mental breakdown. You never see it happen or in the story, but like there's all these weird details. Yeah, she's like she's sort of split between these two figures that represent kind of qualities that she's into. And again, sex and death, Cliff. She lives the entire time near a slaughterhouse. So there's just like blood in the streets and like pigs being killed and like carcasses being like, delivered en masse into these big warehouses next to her apartment. And she's just kind of observing that the whole time. I don't know. It would make sense that you'd go nuts.
Yeah, and I feel like that was, again, we'll come back to this in the other stories, but that's like a sort of like one of those environmental details that Moore makes explicit links to with the character. I mean, not explicit, but clearly, important.
Sausage links.
Yeah, exactly. Important links to the character's psychological state, like and the descriptions of the blood just like running in the street and pooling and mixing with the dirty like city water, and in this kind of like gross admixture, which may be sort of a metaphor for the fake boyfriend that she creates in her head as like a ultimately gross and impossible concoction.
Well, I really do think of Frankenstein. I really did think Frankenstein monster, like raw meat slapped together into a non-living but sort of galvanized creation, just that ultimately can't exist and is like maddening
and undesirable ultimately because like, and I think also there's the weird little detail of the little girl who spits on her at the beginning, and then she encounters like 2 or 3 other times, and she's kind of this like weird, kind of not quite demonic but otherworldly presence in the story, and just kind of cutting. It reminded me of the Capote story Miriam, with the creepy little girl who inserts herself into this sad elderly woman's life.
Yeah, arguably unreal, maybe. Like I think one of the big things that gets brought up a bunch is and then is sort of, I think, the most emphasized at the end in the last story is like you can choose something, right? Or you have nothing. Like that kind of idea, right? Like kind of being bounced around. Like you can think about shit all you want, but you have to make a choice, or you like will have nothing.
Yeah, I'll read this little section I underlined in this story because that totally relates to it. 2 pulled $1 from his pocket. There you go, my man, he said. It suddenly seemed to Mary that she would have to choose, that even if you didn't know who in the world to love, it was important to choose. You choose love like a belief, a faith, a place, a box for one's heart to knock against like a spook in the house. I love that because, it's very Sterner. But it also, like, even though the story, the way we're describing it, sounds sort of like really dark and kind of, only dark at this point. But there are snippets throughout all of her stories, I would say, that are very heartfelt and uplifting, even though they kind of they're like cut off by a dark moment, like right after something like this happens. But I do love those little moments like that.
It's like just her impending madness, and then the slaughterhouse as the like sort of 2 prevailing things that you're like, okay, like this is the darkness here. I had another little passage too that was just sort of about indecision, which I thought was funny. Because she goes and takes that trip eventually, and it's just kind of like whatever. she
just decides she needs to go to Canada.
Yeah, it reminded me of. Did you guys ever see the movie Frances Ha?
Mm-mm.
No. Is that a Woody Allen movie?
No, I forget who the fuck it is actually. But this girl goes. She thinks she's a dancer and she's kind of mediocre at dance, and then she like decides to like whimsically kind of take this trip to France, and she's jet lagged and she just kind of like hangs out and sits on a bench a lot of the time in like a park and like whatever. And then she comes back and she's not really successful. I don't know. It reminded me of like this character's trip to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little part. It's she bought guidebooks about Canada, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island. She stayed in her room, away from spitters, the girl. Alternately flipped and perused the pages of her books, her head filling like a suitcase with the names of hotels and local monuments and exchange rates and historical episodes, a fearful excitement building in her to an exhaustion. Travel moving up through her like a blood until she felt she had already been to Canada, already been traveling there for months, and now had to fall back alone on her bed and rest.
Yes, I know that feeling. Like
yeah,
planning for a trip like that, and then it's I think I have another passage related to the trip that I also just thought was funny. So maybe I'll just throw it on here on the stack. And this is when she's actually in Canada and she's in Ottawa. Mary went to a restaurant that had once been a mill, and she smiled at the waiters and stared at the stone walls. At night, alone in her hotel room, she imagined the cool bridal bleach of the sheets healing her, holding her like a shroud, working their white temporarily through her skin and into the thinking blood of her. Every morning at 7, someone phoned her from the desk downstairs to wake her up. "What is there to do today?" Mary inquired. "You want Montreal, miss. This is Ottawa." But again, like that even that little line, which is really funny, and there's all this, there are those moments of levity and humor, but even that little line is about the distinction between these two things that are like irreconcilable. Like you're supposed to be in Montreal, but you're sort of in the wrong place. You've made the wrong choice. Etc.
And that traveling, sitting on a bench theme comes into play later in the story with the young British boy that visits the couple.
Yeah, in another story.
Definitely.
Yeah. We'll talk about that
because you have this main character who's not making a choice, in a way, and then you have people that do make the choice, and it's also disappointing, and it's just like there's no. If you have a certain conception of things, I guess it maybe is one of the points Moore is making. Like then you will be in pain, or something like that.
Right. Did
you think this main character was pregnant?
There's a lot of ambiguity because I don't know about that. What made you think that, man?
Again, I'm sort of remembering back as this being the first one, but like she has these like doesn't she have these pains?
I thought that was a different story. Because there's another story. There's another story. Yeah, I think it's Joy, where the girl goes on that date with the guy dressed on Halloween as a woman. He's like wearing like a weird woman suit.
That's your ugly too. Yeah.
Oh, you're ugly too. In that story, she like definitely has cancer.
Or something.
Did I just make this up?
Well, while you look for that, Matt, the other thing that was ambiguous to me at the ending of this story is whether or not the second boyfriend kills himself, or if that's just a dream that Mary has, right? Because their last interaction is like pretty negative, and he was kind of like, doing like stalker harassment behavior, like when she got back from Montreal, just like calling her like pick up, and she was kind of ignoring it. Yeah. And then she finally picks up, and he's like, all jealous, and the second boyfriend is kind of this like dark, like brooding, like tortured artist type guy, and they have this negative interaction on their last phone call, and then there's this passage that I'll just read to kind of bring home the ambiguity in it. At home, the phone rang, but Mary let the machine pick it up. It was nobody. The machine clicked and went through its business, rewound. Beneath her, the hooks and pulleys across the meat store ceiling rattled and bumped. In a dream, the phone rang again and she picked it up. It was somebody she knew only vaguely, a neighbor of boy number 2. "I have some bad news," he said in the dream. But then the next day, the girl comes up to her and like is talking about her imaginary boyfriends and is like, "Oh, I'll never get to meet," or "They're unreliable because they're all dead."
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, again, this kind of like weird ambiguity and sort of, and again, like Matt said at the beginning, it's important that this character is written as having already in the throes of or on the edge of sort of a mental breakdown.
Yeah, maybe I'm probably conflating. I can't really find it, so
Yeah.
I might be thinking the other way.
Well, should we talk about the next story?
Yeah, let's scoot it.
Okay, so the next one is called, how do we pronounce this? Visi d'Art, which,
Let's see if
you want to give it a shot, Matt?
No, you did it. It's good. Yeah. Visi d'Art.
Visi d'Art, which is a song, right? Mm-hmm. It's from an opera. I forget which one. I think it's a Puccini opera. I looked it up when I was reading it, but I've forgotten now. And so this is the one story, as we mentioned, that is written from the point of view of a male character.
This guy reminded me of the Moon Palace guy.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. How so?
Just like a man, like I feel I got the sense like a younger guy. I forget if the age is expressed, but like dedicated to some sort of artistic pursuit, and like just wasting away in a shitty apartment while he does that.
Yeah, true.
And it not working out also, really.
See, that's interesting that you said that, because I actually read this guy. His name's Harry. I actually was reading him as if he was a little bit older, like mid late 40s or something almost, if not even older than that. But I don't know why. Again, I'm not sure if I don't think the age is explicitly ever mentioned. But yeah, he's basically like a struggling playwright who had like a mild success of a play that was written up, and he was in the like top 25 something. Playwrights. Well, yeah, because doesn't it say he was in like top 20 under 30 or something, and then
he's
this
like a 30 under 30 dude. Yeah,
and then but then this takes place sort of years after that, and so he's maybe in his mid 30s or something by this time or something like that.
There are a lot of the people that age. It does feel like a bit of like also a book. I mean, there's older characters or whatever, but like it did feel more about the kind of specific crises of being like, I guess, in your 30s maybe or something like that.
And like as Matt said, he's sort of been working on this big play that's gonna shoot him back into the limelight, and it's gonna be awesome, and he's gonna get famous, and it's based on, you know, loosely based on sort of his life, and it culminates with this dramatic scene of his grandmother, right? I think dying, great aunt, dying, which really emotionally affected him. And his girlfriend's, you know, sick of it because they're just poor, and he's like not doing anything, and they live above a like a peep show kind of club. The 25-cent girls sign.
They live in like Hell's Kitchen or like some
Yeah, exactly. And he ultimately, you know, his girlfriend, who you know, we got to mention funny names on this show whenever they occur. His girlfriend's name is Brecky.
Brecky. Is that a Brecky?
Which just like that's just that feels like something, I don't know.
That's PKD levels.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. It's like a PKD.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It is.
You don't think?
It's a great name. I think it like totally fits the character.
Brecky?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like a name matching up with the characterization of somebody, I thought it was like perfect.
Okay, well, how so? What do you mean by that?
Well, I just remember the character being kind of like annoying and weird, and she just seemed like a brekkie. And I thought that Moore had like a really good...
I don't think she was annoying. I think she was like reasonably frustrated with a kind of dirtbag boyfriend who's like...
Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting her confused with another character. I'm sorry.
We can't keep
stories
things,
you read.
Yeah, we can't keep any of this shit straight in our dumb heads.
Yeah, brekkies just seems normal. I mean, it's slang
for
brekkies
breakfast
by British people.
Okay. That is true.
But so yeah. Anyway, so
Brecky was normal.
The story culminates with him. You know, finally, you know, Brecky leaves him. He tries to call her, and she's, you know, finds another partner, and he finally gets sort of to the depths of poverty that he finally starts accepting phone calls from these Hollywood TV show people who want him to like write episodes of TV shows based on the like play that he wrote years before. and he has a meeting with one of these guys and winds up basically like spewing his entire play to him, and then the guy basically just rips him off and like writes a TV episode based on it anyway. And that's kind of the end. He kind of freaks out.
Yeah. That one made me sad, mostly. Because the dude,
I love this one.
I did too.
It was a nightmare. It was a fucking nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
It was like an anxiety-inducing. It was really funny too, and also it also was a little bit like oddly charming and hopeful too. Like there's the prostitute on the street that he runs into over the course of like many weeks and months, who like obviously just wants to like date him. At least that's how I saw it. And he's in love with Brecky, and he has to get Brecky back, and he just doesn't give her the time of day. But it does end up spiraling into a nightmare with the producer from Hollywood or whatever, like stealing his ideas.
Scarp. What was his name? Something Scarp.
Scarp.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Yeah,
Edward Sharp and the Magnetic Zeros.
Glenn Scarp.
Glenn Scarp.
Yeah.
Like Harry's like, he caves in. This guy, this agent, who he had sort of. He was a classic artist. Like, I don't want to fucking. I mean, I think the other image is like, I don't want to prostitute myself, and he's like in the red light district essentially of New York. But like,
right, exactly.
He's like, I'm pure. Like, I'm gonna like take I'm gonna curate these like these beautiful moments from my life into the best play. And then he gets poor, and he's like, all right, I'll write one episode of television based on one episode or one scene or something from like my play. And then he's so desperate for an audience for what he's been working on for like years and years that he just basically does all the parts and does a one-man show for this agent from and he gets a huge amount of confirmation from that, because the agent like is
likes
like super into it and loves it, and then Harry's like, nice, I fucking crushed it, like I'm getting the work. And he's like riding high for like 5 days, and then he hears nothing, and then eventually he gets in touch with Scarp again. Scarp's like, dude, it was so nice hanging out with you. Like, I wrote an episode doing all that great stuff you were saying, and I'm so excited for you to see it. And it's just gone now. Yeah.
And then he finally breaks down and goes into the strip club, which he made like a big deal about having never been into, despite having lived above it for all of these years. And that final scene is just like, it's so, you could see it in just like a fucking A24 movie where he's he's just in the strip club and sitting in the booth. I guess it's one of these private booth things with the glass screen between you and the dancer, and she just kind of puts her body up against the glass, and he just shoves his face against it, and like
and he tries to impart warmth between this cold glass. It reminds me of Paris, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the scary or the more anxiety inducing moment for me, Matt, it was like he when he chooses to tell his like life story and like the play that he's been working on in conversation to the guy, it's not necessarily because he just wants to talk to someone. It's because he wants to like keep him interested so he'll get the job as a writer. And the other thing that made it kind of anxiety inducing was that like you kind of got the feeling or the impression that he knew how these Hollywood types thought and knew how to like talk to them to get the job. Like he just had this idea in his head that he knew the world perfectly and knew it was going to happen and knew if he talked to this guy this way it'll be correct. But Scarp, what was his name? Scarpy?
Scarp, yeah.
Scarp. It really comes out that I don't even know if Scarp was like trying to be an asshole by taking his ideas.
Well, I think that's one of the interesting questions. It's like, yeah.
It was more, to me, it almost felt like a Paul Auster story, like some single guy just kind of descending into madness, but you kind of buy into his madness as you read it, because it's like kind of clear and well thought out madness.
Mm-hmm.
But then the culmination of the story ends up being just like complete. You suddenly see the cards crash down, and he's just a guy in New York City living in a terrible, shitty apartment and looking at naked women through a plexiglass.
Yeah, he's got these plumbing issues the whole time the story's going on, where like his fucking bathtub and stuff keep like filling with like progressively worse material.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like a little bit of water, and then it's like kind of brackish water, and at the end it's like
Just
literally like a
sludge.
black goo sludge, just fatberg coming through his fucking pipes.
Yeah. And then, you know, like again, like reading that stuff, it was also weird because you wonder about, there's a lot of kind of, I feel like the phrase magical realism is just cringe at this point, but it's because even the way the stuff gets in the tub, he's like, I plugged it and I didn't drain it the last time, so why is it replaced with this totally different liquid? And it becomes very like hallucinatory almost. And then of course that is paired with his ongoing paranoia about his own health, because there are these trucks that park outside of his apartment every night to go, like these big, you know, semi trucks that are, their drivers are going to the strip club or hiring prostitutes or whatever, and sex workers.
They're just idling,
and they're just idling the trucks, and so he becomes obsessed with like the health effect of this exhaust that's going to have on him, and he becomes one of those guys who calls the cops over and over again, and they're eventually just like, all right, dude, we get it, like we know who you are.
Yeah, he becomes a bit of a Karen to the cops, and I forget when, but later in the story he calls the cops for like a legitimate reason, and they like know who he is and they hang up on him because he's been calling for months and months. And it's also kind of unclear whether or not he's actually concerned about his health or just wants the trucks gone. You know, he just becomes so obsessed with like these idling trucks. It's also really funny, like the first time he yells at one of the truckers, the trucker's like, I'm not going to turn off the engine, we're going to get cold.
Yeah, right.
It's like, it makes sense what I'm doing.
Yeah, leave me alone.
Yeah, this definitely felt a lot like the inhumanity of New York City. Mm-hmm. Glad to know it's been that way forever.
Yeah, can definitely relate. I mean,
there was just a turn. One of the other things that Lorrie Moore does very well is like find these like turns of phrase or metaphors for things. Like that's a huge part of the pleasure of like reading her stuff. In this story there was this one which made me laugh. Harry goes to these coffee shops to work, classic, and left the apartment to roam the streets again, to find an open newsstand, a safe coffee shop that didn't put a maraschino cherry on the rice pudding, so that even when you picked it off, its mark remained soaked in like blood by Walt Disney.
Yeah, that was such an interesting turn of phrase.
Yeah. She's fucking full of those. And I think, sorry, were you going to say something, Gabe?
I was just going to read another passage from this story that had the similar effect on me. Just like, yeah, like Moore's writing is just like, she comes up with these, you know, metaphors or similes and like, you know, I could see a type of person reading this and being like, oh, there's too many. It's all like simile stuff and whatever. And I know that's sort of frowned upon by a certain school of writing, but the turns of phrase and the connections that Moore is able to kind of make are just like, I was reading some of these and I just like would sit back and be like, who fucking thinks like that? Like, who makes that connection mentally? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So here was one for me. So he's talking to I guess one of his old friends who's living in Seattle. And Dane, yeah. And so he says, Tell me something wonderful, he said to Dane. He would lie on his bed, the phone cradled at his cheek, and stare lonesomely at the steeple made by the shadow of the bookcase against the wall. Tell me that we are going to die dreamfully and loved in our sleep. You're always writing one of your plays on the phone, said Dane. I said something wonderful. Say something about springtime. It is sloppy and wet. It is a beast from the sea. Ah, said Harry. And I just think that little phrase, like springtime, it's a beast from the sea. I was just like, that's like, just like those little phrases are just like so sprinkled everywhere in these stories. I'm
not sure if I underlined it, and I think it's this story, but there's a line about like dying in your sleep, and I think it's the story, but maybe it's not. But the character says like, I've always wanted to die in my sleep, but like tonight, like not now, like not tonight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't
remember. It's like, which is funny because that's how he said he would like to die, but just not right now.
Yeah,
just not right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's another kind of theme that comes up in these stories, like we'll talk about in the final story when we get there, that the sort of like something needing to happen, but it can't, or I don't want it to happen right now. Like there's this time displacement where it's things happening, but it's not the right time, or it's the Hamlet and / Derrida reference. Like the time is always out of joint a little bit in these stories, like to the point where you miss a connection or something doesn't happen in the right way at the right moment. I also just wanted from this story just briefly to bring up, because Matt brought up like the horrors of New York City in this story, and I wanted to bring up the sex worker woman who lives below him that he sees every morning, Deli.
Yeah, her name's Deli.
And her whole story is that like she came to New York City from, you know, some small town, and she just saw like blazing signs with the word delicatessen, and she was just like, that's a beautiful word, and that just became her name because she didn't know what it meant.
That's my sex worker name, Deli.
She didn't know what it meant, and then, you know, her whole development, where her whole thing, you know, classic kind of like, I want to get out of this, I want a real job, and like he shows up one day and she's like, look, I got a real job. And her real job is handing out flyers for the sex club.
You're like,
yeah. So just sort of like this lateral movement that doesn't really change anything about people's lives seems to be another theme here.
Yeah, like only a slight improvement on the current situation. But yet again, though, that it rubbed me in a heartwarming way too. That moment, she's like, even though it's a small thing, it was a small enough thing that made my heart warm a little bit. Like, but she's then trying to get the attention of Harry by doing this. At least that's how I read it.
But then he watches her out the window, and she ultimately just gives up and throws them all in the trash can because she sees everybody else doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's paying attention. She's just like, this is fucking pointless, actually.
Yeah. All right, let's move on here. Story 3. Sad. Yeah, sad. All right.
I'm becoming sad again.
Matt, your turn here. Joy.
What is this? What the fuck is this one?
This is the one about the woman who works at the cheese shop.
Yeah, once again, don't really know how to like succinctly describe this. I mean, Jane, right? Jane is the name of the woman, but
yeah.
I mean, this one seems very simply about small joys, I guess.
I think this is the only one that doesn't really like center around a relationship or is kind of...
A relationship has like passed and this woman is single now. But yeah, it doesn't really center around a relationship of any kind. It's just this woman living alone. It centers more around like medical needs for her cat. And then she just works at the cheese shop and like, I don't know, like just these small like moments that she
has like a
enjoys.
coworker that she kind of has not a relationship, but like a friendship with, that works at the cheese shop, and
it's sort of,
she's kind of a brazen person.
The kind of like catalyzing event, if you can call it that, is like one of her old friends who's, you know, slightly more whatever successful in life, like shows up and she's like, oh, you're a manager at a cheese shop. How's that going? You know, like the classic sort of just like seeing someone from your past, you know, high school reunion type experience. And, you know, yeah.
She feels lacking, but then that relationship, they start talking, and I don't know, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, she suggests that she should join the local choir, like the church choir. And
oh, yeah, because she's a singer, and then she goes to the choir class, and the teacher's like, someone's not supposed to be here. There's 120 people. It's you. And she just leaves. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. I got to
go. We don't have enough sheet music. Who's here not supposed to be? She's like, it's me, Jane.
This was the one story that I've been watching a lot of New Girl, was Zoe Deschanel. And I was like, this is the one story that I feel like could be a plot of a sitcom episode. Kind of gave me, not that it was, you know, bad by any means. It was just like, it was kind of like more uplifting and lighthearted, I would say.
Zoe can come on the podcast at any time.
Yeah.
Yes. And whatever property brother she's dating.
This is definitely, this felt like, is she actually dating a property brother?
I'm pretty sure she's dating one of the twin.
I don't know, that cracked me up so much.
Do you, Zoe, take this property brother?
One of the property brothers on the podcast?
Yeah.
He's like the the structure of this novel is really sturdy. Yeah, just stuff like that.
This novel felt like an open concept kitchen.
He would have told us exactly what was wrong with the toilets in the last episode, or the last story.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's a number of reasons.
Sounds like the main stack.
Oh my god.
This one was like the most lightest touch to me. It felt slice of lifey kind of, or like there wasn't a lot of like heady drama. It's like her cat, and then
Fluffers.
like just kind of like by all accounts living this unremarkable and very like boring, and by some descriptions by some people like just kind of sad life. But she doesn't feel that way about it. She doesn't feel that way about it, and it's not disingenuous that she doesn't. I don't know.
Well, and the other important subplot here is she takes her cat to the vet, and she encounters another family who's bringing in a dog for surgery, or another. Is it another cat or a dog? I forget.
It's another
a
cat.
Dog or it's a cat.
Oh, it's a dog. I thought it was.
I think it's another. I think it's another cat. I don't remember.
And it dies.
And she comes back later, and the cat. She sees the dad speaking sort of in hushed tones to the vet, and the cat has died during surgery. And what's that all about?
What?
Death.
So what does that mean?
Well,
I don't know why. I don't know why that got me.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, again, like it's like Matt was talking about. It's sort of like these small joys always kind of, attached at the hip to these small sadnesses, right? That and they're never sort of, you can never really de-link those two things. It seems like as part of the story.
Yeah. I don't know. She just works at her cheese shop, and Heffy is the name of the other lady.
Heffy.
Yeah, another weird name.
Heffy's face was described as a snowy moon of things never done.
Oh my god! I was just about to fucking read that. I underlined it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal it, but another one of those descriptions where I'm just like, damn, burn. I think.
Yeah.
Also brilliant.
Yeah. Brilliant, and I did want to go back to like the in the it's not really a forward. It's just like a shout out to Zelda Fitzgerald. The quote at the very beginning.
Yeah, the epigraph.
Yeah, it just says, "It seemed very sad to see you going off in your new shoes alone," which I read like 1,000 times. I was like, this is just a line of poetry, basically, to me. It's just like thought-provoking. It doesn't necessarily make sense. But I feel like after reading that, I noticed that Moore was like, she does that so often, or tries to emulate that same sort of poetic grip on you in certain sentences. And that was one of them that I felt like she was trying to do it. She does it way more in different passages, and especially at the end of stories. Like at the end of the last story, it's just like amazingly poetic and strange. But I just wanted to mention that.
I think I also just wanted to mention that moment where she's kicked out of the choir rehearsal. It's another one of those like kind of time out of joint moments, like wrong place, wrong time. Like you're not, like you said, like Matt, you're not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
It's everything is just a little bit on a lilt, I wanted to read this other passage from this story that I think you put on Instagram or something, Paul, on your Instagram. So it says, this is about her kind of ex-boyfriend who, they broke up, and part of another subplot of the story is her kind of sort of memory of him. And there's a beautiful description of like, he comes back to the town and they go on this like little drive for old time's sake, and they see the Mississippi River, and it was just it's so American and so just like subtle. And like you said, Matt, this story is very delicate. It's very like light. There's not a lot of but this passage is her thinking about him again. For a short time she mourned him, believing he had anchored her, had kept her from floating off into no man's land, that land of midnight cries and pets with too many little toys. But now I know, just like...
Yeah.
But now she rarely thought of him. She knew there were only small joys in life. The big ones were too complicated to be joys when you got all through. And once you realized that, it took a lot of the pressure off. You could put the pressure aside like a child's game, its box ripped to flaps at the corners. you could stick it in some old closet and forget about it. And again, like it's that kind of muted mundanity, which is, like she says, coming to terms with small joys as like most of what you can get out of life. And I think the ending of this story where, Heffy quits and they spend an afternoon just drinking champagne behind the counter and eating the cheese, it was just so beautiful and like such a perfect example of what Moore was trying to get across.
Yeah. Yes. This might be one of my more favorite stories in the collection, just because of that. Like, this one felt the most real to me, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it. Like, just kind of how things are, even just for me, I guess, or I don't know.
It reminded me. Like, I was. Oh, sorry, you cut out for a second, Matt. Go ahead.
Like you said.
Oh no, just like the. No, I'm saying there's just like clearly she's got like a bit of a. She's got her breakup. There was whatever. She was living elsewhere. I think she's back home basically.
Yeah.
It's like fine, but like a little depressing. But you just sort of you take joys where you can get them.
Yeah,
and it's not really that bad either. Like it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That could be more American, but it's like. There's a lot to be said for what you have, but there's no value judgment either way.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, this story, you've mentioned it. Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say like it's not like the last line in the story, but Heffy at one point says as they're drinking behind the counter, she just toasts and says, "To our little lives." And I just thought it was a great little like joyous little summation of the story. It was just like. Cute and beautiful. They're in a cheese shop and they're just like kind of happy with where they are.
Yes.
I just saw them as like in one of those big malls, just one of those little stores in a mall, like the one out by you gave. Just like literally just like big like that like big great fence thing that you like roll down. Closed and locked up, and they're just like having champagne with like most of the lights off, but they're just like chilling and eating random cheese samples.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it reminded me. I mean, you've mentioned a couple times about this story, Matt, and then maybe we need to wrap up before we get to the Patreon only segment. But
oh god,
it reminded me. I was reading a little today, and I have read a lot, more in the past. But I was reading some Chekhov short stories. And Chekhov's kind of whole thing is like there's not, like you said, there's not a lot of drama. It's just very kind of like slice of life, very just trying to find the meaning in the mundanity, in those tiny little details of people's like day-to-day life. And this story made me think of Chekhov in that way, because there's no high drama. It's a very like I said, a very delicate thing, and you're not going to be like blown away. You got to sit with it for a bit,
But more, it's not just like there's a lack of high drama. There's a lack of high drama like enacted in a lot of these cases. Not all that. Some of these stories have some crazy shit in them, but like the interior lives of these people don't shy away from the fact that it feels like fucking high drama, like that your dreams are thwarted and you oscillate back and forth in these painful ways in these moments, and you don't know what the fucking right thing to do is, but in doing so often you don't do anything, and like that's also bad. But she's not afraid of that being like a highly relatable and like sometimes also good process, while also often causing the very pain you were afraid of, I guess.
Yeah, and I think her brilliance with it is like taking these little moments and ideas and stories and like translating them in her writing and making them so apparent to us in such a beautiful way. Sorry, I had a glass of wine and I'm like a little sappy now.
Why no cogito, dude? Remember that pun from the other story?
Oh my god, that was so funny. Yeah. There may be tears to come in the Patreon only segment. Dude. To be honest, I definitely cried a few times during these stories, but
including this one coming up.
including the next one, You're Ugly Too, which arguably one of the meteor stories in the collection, but we're gonna have to save it because we're at our artificial limit for
All right.
all of these people. These people
How many
being
did we
you
get through?
lovely
4?
listeners. We only got through 3.
3.
Yeah,
3.
this is the short story conundrum.
Short
So
episode.
I think not really.
No. Regular.
I think we can justifiably skip the beloved Harry Potter segment.
Yeah, too
Because
much.
there's just too many characters here
Too
to do it for. But that means we get to go straight to scores.
All right.
No, we can do the Scrabble.
Oh, the Scrabble word. You're right. I have one.
Me too.
I don't.
All right.
I don't have one.
Matt doesn't have one. He's too smart. He knows all the words in the book.
No, I actually literally. There were a number of times where I was like, write this down, and I didn't do it.
To be fair, I had to scramble to find one before we started too. So I'll go first. And this is one of these words that I know, and I'm like, oh, I know this word, but I have to look it up every time I see it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's one of those words where the meaning just like never sticks for me. And this is actually from one of the ones we've talked about already. It's from VC de Art, and it's deracinated,
Right.
which means like uprooted, kind of, without direction, etc.
It almost sounds like the title of like an 80s action movie, that word, but it's not quite.
I could see it.
The Deracinator. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me. Oh my god, that reminds me. That there's a fucking Hey Arnold episode where
nice,
where there's a like a superhero guy that Hey Arnold meets, and it's kind of like a never meet
Monkey Man.
I
No.
was about to say.
I think it's fucking Hey Arnold. Maybe I'm misremembering. But the guy's name is the Abdicator.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I am the abdicator. Yeah.
That rocks.
Yeah. So yeah, that's that. Shout outs to Hey Arnold fans.
Fucking love Hey Arnold.
I'm pretty sure
I love
he's Hey
Monkey
Arnold.
90s
Man. I
kids
love
remember.
Pigeon Man. I love Stoop Kid.
Stoop Kid, yeah.
My word is ersatz. It's a product. I didn't know this word. Made or used as a substitute, typically an inferior one for something else. So I thought that was a good Scrabble word. There's a Z in there. It's short.
So
use
just
that in Scrabble.
To use it in a sentence, any other literature media you consume is an ersatz version of this podcast.
Yeah, that's a perfect definition. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, score time.
I get to go last.
All right, fine. I'll go first. I don't care. I'm not mad. There's so much more to talk about. We only covered the first 3 stories of this collection here, and I was more or less like blown away by this collection. I was ashamed that I had never heard of Moore before, and I'm thrilled that we finally got that I got to read these. I think it's, everything we've talked about. Moore's abilities with language are like on full display, and they just constantly had me like literally just like leaning back and being like, what? Like where did that phrase come from? They just come out of nowhere. These like brilliant turns of phrase, these brilliant metaphors, and these stories, for some probably personal reasons, like Matt alluded to earlier, just like my own kind of life peregrinations and the places that I've lived, and they just connected with me on such a deep level, and being a mid-30s person, like a lot of these characters, and just being like, what the fuck, just generally like all the time. It's like it's very relatable to me. So for me it's a 4.33, and I'm thrilled to read more Lorrie Moore as soon as possible.
More, please.
Give me more.
Remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
You want more?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's a funny thing to reference.
I don't know what you're talking about, but cool.
You're talking about Oliver Twist, right?
Oliver Twist.
Yeah.
Man.
Okay.
Oh,
I was like,
literary
I hope I
reference.
got it. Deep cut.
Yeah, deep cut. I'm pretty much right alongside you. I think that like Yeah, this is one of those occasions that people talk about of the kind of mind meld, just sort of like, thank you for putting it this way for me now to use forever. Like, yeah, just a wave sync going on. Just really, really good stuff. And I love short stories, and this is like such a prime example to me of like that form, like those little crystal bullets that just like hit you in the middle of the head.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go ahead and give it a 4.17.
Fuck yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I mean, I really love this a lot. She's so good at like encapsulating the mid or like the late 20s, early 30s person experience with her writing. She wrote this when she was 31. And I really want to know like I want to read more of her for sure. I want to read her, like her novels too, at least one of them. But yeah, she kind of just does everything I like in a book. You know, I just like every choice she made. I like the kind of gut-wrenching stories about love and relationships. But I like how she ended up being able to talk about so many broader themes in life within that storytelling style. And then I really like the accents of almost poetry segments that she had. They were just like so rereadable, and yeah, I just thought it was like overall just really brilliant, and I want to read more. I'm gonna have to give it a solid 4.56555.
Dope, dude. The rare 2 extra like thousandth place or whatever million.
I think I did that with the last one too. I think I'm just gonna keep doing it.
Yeah.
That's
Paul's
good.
just giving the pie scores.
Yeah. You just go into a fugue state and you say like 39 digits. And you're like, well, that's valid. We have to honor our own.
I'm just here furiously writing them all down.
Yeah, Gabe is like, I need to do justice to Paul's.
I want you to keep down every single letter. This is a 4.5657594.
Well, as always, there's a lot more to say about this book. And how many stories we got left? 5? Yeah, 5 more stories for us to talk about. Arguably some of the best in the collection, and we will be talking about those after the jump for patrons only. Thank you for listening, everybody. We really appreciate you. Patreon.com/Spinecrackers, YouTube.com/Spinecrackers. What else?
MySpace.com/Spinecrackers.
Instagram,
Twitter, all the places you can find us, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye.
Thank you. Read this.
Yeah, read this book.
Read this book.